I want to start by asking you to think back to when you were about 10 years old. What were you doing? Maybe you were discovering boys or girls as the object of your affection. Or maybe you were busy climbing trees, putting together model airplanes, playing with dolls. What I was doing when I was 10 years old was saying goodbye to all the friends that I'd known for a lifetime, packing up my bags, and heading over to some strange land that my parents wanted us to go to, the United States. When I came to this country, I didn't know a lick of English. But my parents depended on me to translate whenever they had parent-teacher conferences, doctor appointments, any kind of figure of authority that they needed to talk to. I came along so that I could translate. So I learned it very quickly just because I had to. And so something interesting happened that I didn't know was preparing me for the calling of my life. When I would go into a meeting, my parents would have one piece of the conversation. The teacher or the doctor or whoever would have the other part of the conversation, but I would hold the context for all of it. Now, I can neither confirm nor deny that I got myself out of trouble by using my translating skills. And what I saw was that let me back up a little bit and tell you that by the time that I was 11 years old, I was in 9th grade. So while most 11-year-olds were in middle school figuring out what they were going to do with their recess, I was studying for midterms and so forth. I was a bully's dream, with the accent, with the awkward social skills, little compared to the rest of my cohorts. And so I learned to overcompensate. I learned to stack achievement upon achievement upon achievement to kind of shield myself from the barrage of bullying that was coming my way. And I learned about the golden mask. The golden mask is the thing that we put on to make sure that we are presentable, that we get approved, that we get liked, that we get honored, that we don't embarrass ourselves. And the thing is that you think you're the only one with the golden mask, and every time you meet somebody new, you're actually meeting their mask too. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So your mask may have achievements, and it may have accolades, and it may have diplomas like mine did. Other people's may be their relationships, or perhaps their athletic prowess, or perhaps their humor, right? So everybody has different characteristics for their masks. And so we walk around every time that somebody takes off their mask, and every time somebody reveals a piece of themselves, every time that somebody gets vulnerable and honest and raw, we're all like, wow, that was awesome. And we feel so connected. And then we're like, that was great. Back to now, back to the mask. And we go around with the BS conspiracy. I will buy your BS if you buy mine. So high-achieving, top-performing leaders typically have to deal with paradoxes, typically have to deal with oxymorons. We have to deal with the fact that we want to be out there and achieving, and at the same time have to manage some of the dark side of success. Somebody earlier mentioned the dark side of success. And sometimes we do not reveal the soul-sucking, mind-bending design and redesign that we have to do to ourselves, to our mental state, to our discipline, to our relationships in order to show up as cleanly and as politely as we do. Dr. Steve Marquardt, I think I'm pronouncing it right, it's a French last name. He's a maxillofacial surgeon. And he studied the symmetry of beauty. Plato and the ancient Greeks and everybody else who's learned from ancient Egyptians, because they all learned from ancient Egyptians, they all saw the same golden ratio, or phi ratio, or Fibonacci ratio in nature, in architecture, in geometry, and we also see it in the human face. We do it sociologically and psychologically with each other. But there's a certain way that you present yourself. And there are parts of you that are just as accurate, but that you don't show. There's the part of you that may be lazy. There's the part of you who may be passive-aggressive. And all the passive-aggressive people are like, what is she talking about? There may be a part of you that's actually very aggressive, that has a temper, that throws temper tantrums when you don't get your way. Or maybe you hide out. You're the withdrawal type. And so we hide those things. We don't want to reveal those things because we think, well, they won't like that. I'll lose respect. I'll lose credibility. I'll lose my social position. You don't actually articulate that. It's just a subconscious reaction. Because if you heard yourself saying, I will lose my social positioning if I tell people that I'm vulnerable, you'd be like, what idiot did I just become? Right? So I want to talk about the paradoxes of the top visionaries, because just like when I was talking with my parents and translating for them, I had to hold the context of the conversation in one fell swoop. We, as leaders, also have to do the same for ourselves. So what does that look like? The part of you that is high achieving, high performing, that has the words, that has the action, that has the results, that part also resides with the part of you that wants to hide from the world, that perhaps is socially awkward, and that perhaps considers herself lazy. So I'm going to talk about some of those paradoxes that top-performing leaders have. One of them is that you are a visionary. But here's the problem with that. You're like, what's the problem with being a visionary? The problem is that when you have an eagle's eye view of everything and you have so many ideas, you have the paradox of choice. So where do I go? And it's easy to get overwhelmed. It's easy to change directions midstream. And so when you're running a company, when you're running a household, and you're going this way, and then you're like, no, we're going this way. Your children or your direct reports or everybody else that's looking at your direction, they're like, okay, she's going crazy. So you have to balance those two. The next one is that you experience exponential success. And sometimes that sounds like it came easy, or it was luck, or I didn't work that hard. I was talking with somebody earlier who was like, I kind of like get ready on the spot. I don't do the whole like prepare for a week or a month, and I just kind of like show up and do it. And so for somebody who does work for a week or a month on something that this person just goes up and do it, they're like, wow, what a slacker. The next paradox is that you have deep competing commitments. What do I mean by that? It's that on the one hand, you say, yeah, I'm going to make this much money, or I'm going to get this fit by this time, and then you don't do it. And it's not because you didn't mean it. It's because there's a senior commitment that perhaps has been unacknowledged, that you perhaps haven't dealt with. Some of us are more committed to the cheesecake than to the fitness track. Let's be honest. And how do you know what you're committed to? You check with your results. It's really clinical that way. That's one of the things that I love. I always tell people that are my clients or my students when I'm doing executive coaching, when I do business coaching, when I do strategic consulting, it's about matching the data with the dharma. So you have the clinical, the mathematical, the scientific, and then you have the human, the flow, the art and the science all put together. It's, again, being bilingual. I told you, my parents trained me with this translation business. And so when you want to see what you are committed to, just look out at the physical universe. It is the ultimate feedback machine. You want to know how much money you're committed to? Look at your bank account. You want to know what kind of relationships you're committed to? Look at your relationships. Some of it may not make you happy, but as they say, the truth will set you free, but it might piss you off first. So here's what happens with a high-achieving person. You get to a certain peak of a mountain, and this feels good. The view is nice. You can lift your shoulders, you can lift your arms, you're facing the sun, you're on top of the world. It's nice to just stay there. There's a part of you who knows that there's more for you available. And sometimes you have more focus and discipline and commitment and chutzpah in your little finger than some people have in their entire bodies. So it's easy to live in the gray zone. It's easy to be coasting. The problem with the gray zone is that it's too fast for recovery. It's too fast to be a rest stop, but it's too slow for it to be challenging. It's too slow to be a growth spot as well. So you're kind of coasting. And your gray zone, when you're a high-performing person, looks like somebody else's end zone. For them, they'd be if they were where you are, they'd be celebrating. And you're like, I don't know why I'm not happy yet. There's something more, right? And next is that you are a very talented problem solver. This is good. This is good news. I'm going to give you good news and then the not so good news. The good news is you are a very, very adept problem solver. But you know what problem solvers need in order to justify their existence? Problems. And so what happens is you're a visionary and you can see things coming from a mile away, but because you're a talented problem solver, you kind of just coast until they become a problem. Be it taxes, be it a conversation with your spouse or with your children or with a boss or with a coworker or with a professor, be it your own hunger for achievement. Until you hit a wall, you're like, okay, now I got to deal with it because now I have a bruise on my face and it's messing up my golden mask, right? So we kind of just coast in that gray zone. The next paradox is that you seek perfection. Every time that you achieve a certain milestone, the benchmark becomes higher and higher and higher. And so it's harder to get the same high. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you have ever done drugs. I have heard, though, that every time that you do it, the high gets further away and you have to get more and more and more. And that's what leads actually to overdoses clinically. And so when you have this pressure to outperform your last victory, it's very easy to go back to that overwhelm place, that analysis paralysis place. And you can see how these all kind of blend with one another. So it's easy to just go back to the gray zone and say, you know what? I'm good right here. I'm good right here. You're future focused. That means that you have so many ideas in so little time. And you sometimes forget the wake that you leave behind. One time I was talking to the former CEO of Keurig. You know what that company Keurig, they make the coffee machines? And she was in the lunchroom one day and she was looking at one of their machines and she was like, wow, I wonder what would happen if we have the brew button in the front instead of on the side. That little side remark that somebody overheard in the lunchroom cost her product design team about 3 months worth of work. And so they were hustling and they're trying to redesign this thing and re-engineer this thing so that the button can go in the front, and they finally showed it to her and she was like, oh, you did it. Great. And everybody was like, what the hell, man? We just spent a whole quarter trying to build this thing for you. It's part of that so many ideas, so little time. Sometimes we forget the wake that we leave behind with the people that we're in a relationship with, that we work with, etc. And then the next one is, you actually, when you're really, really good at what you do, you actually don't need help. And it's hard sometimes to admit that. It's like, I am pretty badass. I can really pull this off. But the paradox of that is that you miss out on the vulnerability, the connection, and the ability to connect with someone through giving them the opportunity to be a giver while you are the receiver. It is a dance. Just like translating between English and Spanish, it's a dance that has its own syntax, its own grammar rules. And so when you are being in the receiving end, it looks and feels very differently than when you're in the giving end. And sometimes we confuse giving with being in control. When you're being the giver, you feel like you're in control of the relationship, like you have the hierarchy in the relationship, like you're the better person. But it turns out that when you're receiving, and in that humility, and in that surrender, you're actually elevating the people that you're in relationship with. So, what's it gonna be? At some point in your life, you're gonna have to face yourself, and you're going to have to come into relationship with the part of you that challenges you. You know that part of you that always says, who do you think that you are? They're not gonna believe you. They're not gonna trust you. Why even bother? And if you're wondering what that voice is the voice that said, what voice is she talking about? And so just like we have this inner critic, just like we have this self-sabotaging patterns, let's call him the antihero, we also have to remember, first of all, you created that character in your head, just like you created the hero. And secondly, that part of you is actually on your team. That part of you is not your adversary, not your opponent, not your enemy. I hear a lot of people talking about the ego, and you have to kill the ego, subjugate the ego. He's on your team. That inner critic, that sabotage part of you, is actually very wise and reminds you of the things that you would like to forget. Reminds you of the things that you have not yet considered and included into your game plan. There's a quote in the Gospel of Thomas. The master teacher Jesus is quoted as saying, if you do bring forth what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, then what is within you will destroy you. And so the challenge for high-performing people, leaders, whether it's in business or in life, is that you're going to have to get honest, if not with anybody else, then at least with yourself, and own the shadow side, own the dark side, as it were. The part of you that lies, that takes shortcuts, that manipulates people so that you can get your way. Those parts of you don't need to be killed. They just need to be harnessed. And just like there's a movie that I always quote, Jerry Maguire, when they're in this locker room scene. And Jerry Maguire fusses and walks away. He's mad as hell because Rod Tidwell just doesn't understand. And Rod is butt naked and walks out like nothing happened, which I think is a great metaphor for being authentic. And he walks out and he says, see, that's the problem. That's the difference between you and me. You think we're fighting. I think we're finally talking. And I said, that is what your subconscious, what your ego, what your inner critic, what your internal saboteur is always saying to you. You think we're fighting. You think I'm here to kill you. I think we're finally talking. And so the opportunity that you have, when I say unlock your inner CEO, it's not so much about like being a badass. You already are that. It's more about recognizing for yourself and harnessing for yourself the parts of you that are weak, that are childish, that are petty, that are insecure. The parts of you that hold you back. The parts of you that you're thinking, if people only knew, they would fire me so fast, or they would kick me out of this school so fast, or he would leave me so fast. This girl would never date me again if she only knew. Whatever that if she only knew, if they only knew piece of you, he's your ally. And so when you are operating from the place of being in integrity with yourself, being in congruence with yourself, you're not hiding that thing and you're not subjugating that thing. You're harnessing it. And then eventually, after it's all done and said and done, what's that so hard? You know, we sometimes are so afraid of this moment when you're finally going to tell your truth and you're like, and your breath and everything in you tenses up and you're like, okay, here we go, here it is. And then when you finally let it rip, the people around you are like, I'm glad you finally said something because everybody out here knew. And you create connection in that way, but you also create respect. And you create permission for others to do the same. I'm sure there's a quote out there about creating permission for others to do the same. This is what's happening in today's changing world. You can look online, you can look at the news, and every generation says this. This is not unique to 2016. This is not unique to this generation. And you're like, what the hell? The world is going to hell in a handbasket. And the inner saboteur, the inner critic, says, and what are you going to do about it? Well, what can I do about it? That's a great question, but not rhetorical, but like the beginning of a plan, like the beginning of something special, like the beginning of your calling for life. When I was younger, I used to resent having to be dragged out of school so that I can go to an appointment with my parents, and they thought that it was such a great thing that I was among adults because I was so shy. And it was like, she'll do better with adults, but that actually exacerbated the social awkwardness that I felt. And here it is, a couple of years later, and I didn't realize that the thing I hated so much, the thing that made me feel like such a prey in front of other school kids, was actually engineering the rest of my life. And so I'm asking you, what is it that you feel like such a pain in the butt for you, that is such a drag, that sometimes when nobody else is looking and you're in the comfort and safety of your car by yourself driving, that was last night, you just kind of like let it rip? That part of you is your friend. And if you would dare to engage in a meaningful, honest conversation with yourself about the pieces of yourself that you have not yet integrated, about the pieces of yourself that you have not yet made peace with, you will find that you become far more powerful, but also far more effective in the world. And so when you're building this kingdom called I'm going to switch that one for a second. Here we go. When you're building your kingdom, you have different rooms. In the Bible it says, in my Father's mansion there are many rooms. And so your life has many rooms as well. The family room, the relationships room, the achievement, the professional, the financial room, etc. And you just have to get very clear about what goes in it and what doesn't go in it. Because the last paradox of a high-performing person is that you sometimes end up missing out on the truth. The higher you rise, the harder it can be for you to open up to other people around you, and the harder it can be for them to speak their truth to you. And so you're not just doing this because you're a noble and nice person. You're doing this because you're intelligent, because you know this works, and because you know what's at stake. It may be your marriage, it may be your relationship, it may be your business, it may be the health of your team, but something is at stake that's strong enough to let you get out of your own skin and redesign yourself and integrate the parts of you that you don't like to look at. And in so doing, you create permission for others to integrate themselves and live in integrity. And perhaps, if we do that together and we elevate each other's consciousness, we can actually dance together. Thank you.